Do you want personal feedback on how you can get better at Battlefield 5? Well, all you have to do is upload an unlisted video to YouTube and comment the link to that video in the comment section below, and it will appear in a future video on Catalyst HD where I give you personal tips on how to get better as well as helping a whole bunch of other people. Enjoy the video, guys. What's going on, everyone? Nick or Catalyst here. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Hope you are all doing well. Today we have the next installment of the How to Not Suck series, and in today's episode we will be talking about how to not suck at Firestorm in Battlefield 5. If you are new to the game, or if you've been playing Battlefield 5 for a while now, hopefully there's going to be a few tips and tricks here that will help you not only survive longer in Firestorm, but get some Vs for victory as well. Obviously, some of these tips you can apply to all Battle Royale modes, but for the most part today we're going to be covering some of the more mental aspects to the game mode, because to me personally, I could sit here and go through every single mechanic of the Battle Royale mode and waste your time, but we are here to learn how to get better at the game mode, so that's what we're going to do. Without further ado, let's get into it. So in the background is a game of squads. As you can see, it's a game that we end up winning and wipe a little under half the server. It's not the craziest game that you've ever seen by any means, but it is the gameplay in the background for a reason. It's a game in which every single player in the squad had moments to shine, and in the end, everybody worked together extremely well, and I think it's a good example of how a good squad works together. First things first, you just saw us jump out of the plane, ideally, and of course this depends on the trajectory of the plane, but you want to jump around 1,100 meters away from your objective. Now the plane is segregated into 4 different jump locations, but they don't affect how you jump as far as I can tell. Unfortunately, it's not the most clear on how the flight mechanics actually work, but one thing that I've really been able to decipher is that you really can't drop down and then level out and go further and drift like in Apex Legends. It's best to jump out at around 1,100 to 1,200 meters away, descend slightly for a few seconds, and then lift on your stick or your mouse as high as you can while flying, and when you get closer to your drop spot, you focus your crosshair on the area you want to land, and you should drift right in without spending too much time in the air. Ideally, if you hold up the stick as far as you can as soon as you jump out of the plane, you should be able to travel about 1,500 meters away at the max, so keep all of that in mind when you are deciding when and where to jump. One of the better things I think that Firestorm does is that there are a lot of different options for places to land, and you don't have to land in some of the big name locations in order to find good loot. There is no tilted towers that dominates the map and wipes the server, so in general, don't feel like you need to land at a big location in order to get good loot. A location that has a conglomerate of houses will do just fine. When you do get to your destination, if you time the drop correctly and you have enough momentum, you can actually burst through doors before you hit the ground, and this can give you a bit of a head start in terms of looting, especially if you land right next to an enemy squad. So I would suggest, if possible and you have the correct trajectory, always try to land right on the door and see if you can open it instead of landing just outside of it and then wasting time and then running in. One of the first things you should do besides finding a weapon, of course, is put in your one plate of armor if you find one. Generally, they are pretty common in all drop locations, and it's important to make sure that you take the time to put it in before going after other players. You don't want to lose a gunfight and realize the only reason you lost the gunfight is because you forgot to put on your plate and your opponent didn't. It's something that's small and important to note, but you can actually heal your teammates with the syringes that you find on the ground. So if you or your teammates are out of syringes, you can get on the mic and ask one of your teammates to heal you with some of their remaining syringes. You do have to be right on top of them though to heal them, so if you have an uncooperative teammate, which if you are solo queuing you are bound to get at least one of those, it will be hard to heal them, and at some point you'll just have to let them go. But it is important to understand that you can do this, and this is actually something that I didn't realize until quite recently too, so it's very useful, especially if you are in an organized squad. If you do land with other people, you should take the aggressive and go after them if you know where they've landed. You should try and do a 360-degree turn right before you land so you get another idea of where everybody else is dropping in a given area. Taking the aggressive in the early game is extremely important because this is essentially the last time that you are more or less on equal playing field with your opponents. You have a weapon, they have a weapon, and that's it, unless they get extremely lucky with the area in which they lost. You don't have to worry about them getting a higher damaged weapons because the loot in Battlefield 5 is graded in tiers, which allows specializations and attachments instead of damage tweaks and range tweaks. Reversely, knowing where the other squad lands and then waiting for them to come out of their houses, for example, allows the enemy to loot and get situated for a fight, so you're going to almost always want to go on the aggressive. And that's really the first tip in a long line of tips that revolve around playing aggressively, and you'll see that my squad and I really don't stop moving or working together, and that is something that you'll see examples of throughout the entire video. Really, the first step to becoming successful at any Battle Royale game is to get over your fear of death, because fearing the unknown is something that will make you overanalyze your gameplay in your situation and will more often than not get you killed, and sometimes that can be a very hard hurdle to jump over, especially in Firestorm, because the game speed and the game design encourages a more passive and campy playstyle, but as we'll get into, I strongly suggest that you do not play this way. Instead, you should focus on playing fast and playing smart, and the first step to that, as I said, is to get over your fear of death in the game. Sure, you may be able to pick up a few wins here or there by crawling your way and stealthing your way to the last circle, but playing that way is not only very cheap in my opinion, but it opens yourself up to a lot of dangers that you would not have if you were running around and being proactive in creating the best situation for your squad to win. So Catalyst, you're telling me to play fast and smart, but why should I do this instead of a more guerrilla warfare tactical playstyle? Well, I think a good thing to keep in mind is that gun skill is ultimately what is going to be the determining factor in what wins most team fights, so if you struggle with aiming and winning gunfights, camping and waiting for ambushes is only going to work so much. So it's a good model to follow, and it's best to use good positioning and organization in such a way that you almost suffocate the enemy team. And truthfully, if the enemy team has better gun skill than you, the best chance you have at winning the team fight is with better coordination and speed. So in other words, as I said, playing faster and playing smarter. Camping in some trees or lying prone at the edge of the Firestorm isn't going to allow you to do that very well. One of the things that you should work on right away is game sense and decision making, and part of that is just playing the game and understanding the game mode. If you want to get better at something, play it and you'll get better at it. That pretty much goes for everything you do in life anyways, but as it pertains to Firestorm, you should focus on deciphering the information that the game world is giving you. If you see a vehicle being dropped from the sky, for instance, you should know that there are people right around where that car is going to be dropped, because vehicles can only be called in manually. They are not random drops. Obviously, gunfire is a sign as to where groups are, but you need to think about the bigger picture. Which direction is it coming from and how close is it? If it's close enough to you, go and third party the fight. If it's a little further away, it's your call as to whether or not you want to go and search out the fight, or just leave them alone and make a mental note that a group is over that way. As the game progresses, objectives will open up and the game will tell you when teams are capturing those. The faster the flag is being captured, the more people are still alive in the squad and on the flag. And the closer and closer you get to the end game, the more important these things become to remember. Because when chaos ensues, it's tough to keep in mind everything that is going on and keeping track of where teams are and where they've been. Now, as it pertains to actual gunfights, there are a few things that can really help you. The first tip is something called juggling, and this is when you trade off gunfights with your teammates almost as if you're playing hot potato, and you just saw my teammate Irv and I do this early in the gameplay, just now actually, when we got into a gunfight, and this is an especially good tactic when you get surprised by an enemy. What you'll see in the clip is Irv make first contact on a group that I spotted through the window, and I'll run up behind him and tell him on the mic to pull back and trade off, and he is going to move back and get a quick heal down while I resume the gunfight in his place. Almost like a tag team in professional wrestling, and we end up peeking the corner together and taking down the enemy before I go on a flank and we wipe the squad. Now, juggling is a blanket term for a bunch of other concepts in one, and a few of these concepts are team shooting and baiting, because it involves basically double teaming a target, but oftentimes without them even knowing what's going on. It's very easy to focus a target and then get tunnel vision and forget about the greater battle going on, so you're going to want to be in constant communication with your teammates about what you're doing and knowing what they're doing as well. You heard me talk about suffocating the enemy. If you do everything as clean and fast as possible, you should install a sense of panic to the enemy team. Now, juggling is very much so based on communications, as I said, so if you are solo queuing, this is going to be more difficult, but it's applicable in a lot of different situations, especially in huge team fights in which each member of the squad is engaged with another member of another team, and it's very important to call things out to teammates. If your enemy is one shot, call it out to your teammates so he can take your place, and you can resume the gunfight while you rotate and pick up the slack somewhere else until your team gets a pick. And speaking of that, getting a pick is the single most important thing that you can do in a team fight besides reviving teammates, because that pick is basically the most gigantic green light you've ever seen in your life. It's basically jumpstarts your entire forward attack. When you get an enemy player down, that is your cue to go on the aggressive every single time. Do not hesitate. If you've watched any competitive esport, whether it's CSGO or Overwatch or Call of Duty, you'll notice how good teams organize their attacks around the death or downing of an enemy team's player. So when you get a pick in Firestorm, if you are in the position to do so, push up with your squad mates and start to press on the enemy from as many angles as possible. And as I said earlier, suffocate them literally. Go around and suffocate them until you get the squad wipe. Learning to do this fast and learning to do this in an organized fashion is really what is going to help you start winning more games. As far as positioning is concerned, you should make it a general rule to take the high ground in every situation if possible, and make sure you use the terrain given to you as leverage when you enter those gunfights. Now, in other Battle Royale games, it's a pretty common strategy to ride the edge of the circle so that you don't find yourself in the middle of the play zone and getting shot from multiple sides, and although that's a valuable strategy in other BR modes, I don't think it's one that suits Firestorm just because of how strong the storm actually is, because it doesn't only chunk your health, it also restricts your vision and your ability to hear footsteps while in the storm itself. But you shouldn't exactly be at the center of the circle either, for obvious reasons. I suggest thinking of it as like a tree stump. When you look at the tree stump, you see rings on the oak that go from the center on outward. Ideally, you want to be closer to the edge of the circle, but to continue this analogy, a couple rings closer to the center. Basically, just in between, I guess. I guess it would have just been easier to say in between. Now, for just a few tips in general, obviously one of the cooler vehicles in Firestorm is the helicopter, but in my opinion, you shouldn't use it for transportation. Use it for reconnaissance. First and foremost, try having one member of your squad fly through the air around the circle and gather information on where squads are and relay them to your teammates. And by chance, if the copter goes down, your entire team doesn't go down with it because you're not transporting everybody to another location. One of the most tense things that you can do in the game is when you are opening up the bunker doors to get a tank or staghound, but obviously it calls a lot of attention to yourself, so you want to spend as little time opening the doors as possible, right? Well, if you open the doors about 30%, that is just enough for you and your team to squeeze through the door and get to the loot inside. And if you end up wanting the tank, of course you have to open both doors all the way. But if you're just interested in, say, the safe that often spawns inside the bunker doors, you only have to open it about 30%. When you get one of those tanks, you should never ever abandon it and just leave it there. As you can see in the gameplay, we wiped a squad and they just left their tank for us to enjoy. Now, not only did it have more ammo and more fuel than the one we were currently using, but it was in better condition overall. So what we did is we swapped tanks and we made sure to destroy the tank that we were originally in so that nobody else could get it and use it against us. There is no friendly fire in Firestorm when it comes to small arms fire, but for whatever reason, friendly fire is on when you call in a V1 rocket or artillery strike, so make sure you think twice about firing one of those two on your friends when you're in the middle of a gunfight. Obviously, one of Firestorm's biggest problems is looting. It's extremely hard to find what you want. Well, I've found it significantly easier to loot when I have my syringe out or holding an armor plate. Now, not only does this free up more of the screen to allow me to try and dig for what I actually want to get, but it also gives me a chance to heal myself while I'm looting. And last but not least, it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways, when you are playing squad, make sure that you do go everywhere with your squad and that you stick together. That is going to be the #1 reason why you die, other than being outpositioned by an enemy. Is if you see a pile of loot out in the open, if you see some houses that you don't think are looted and you want to go check, just make sure that you always have a teammate at least within 50 to 100 meters of you, so they do have an attempt to save you if you end up getting surprised by a camper with an MG42 in the corner of a house or something. But with that all being said, that has been the How to Not Suck at Firestorm video. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it, make sure that you drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new to the channel. There's going to be more Firestorm content, more Battlefield 5 content in general. Turn on post notifications if you haven't already. My name is Nick or Catalyst, and I will see you all another time.